If you just do it, it'll turn out okay. And today, we're talking about what I guess turned out okay for the last 1,000 years at least, the creation of the Kingdom of England.
Yep. The country that eventually becomes a bloody empire. But now it's just full of turfs.
Uh, so, coming back again, my guest and knowledgeable about all things England, the Bede.
Yes. Hello, the N bead. Yes. But yeah, I go by bead.
So before you
Usually.
start, I think I ever asked. I forget if I asked you this or not. What made your interest in England history?
I have no idea. That was a long time ago. I don't really remember what happened. All I know is that eventually, I don't know, it just became something I liked. I was able to I memorized the order of the kings of England after the Norman conquest. I'm sorry. The Anglo-Saxon kings of England get really really muddled, and they've all got like super similar names, and they don't have the numbering conventions either. So it's a mess there. So but
Well, I don't know about the order of them, the old kings, but I did one time in like 12th grade. I literally taped together like 20 different family trees all the way from Alfred the Great to the current rulers, put them all together of England and Scotland, and then taped them together and made a little photocopy of it on my big printer photograph thing in printing class.
yeah,
Like
yeah, family tree. Those family trees start looking more like bushes, though. So, ooh.
a lot of crossover with France and Spain and Scotland. A lot of
Yeah, yeah, and then there's some sussy marriages later on in the Kingdom of England. Gladly, the sussiest of them all, which I think they were like second cousins, did not produce any children. So
I think it was
that's
that
good.
the was that William the Third and Mary the Second,
Yep,
the one of
they
the
were
last,
second. Yeah, they were second cousins, and it was
both both
gross.
both grandchildren of Charles the First.
Yeah, like why? Why would you?
Oh,
I'm sorry, I
well,
can't do it.
at least it wasn't as bad as the Habsburgs.
That is true. That is true. The Habsburgs did not have a family tree. They had like a family bramble bush or something. I don't know. Something that like intersects constantly. Disgusting.
But
They talk.
before we sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. It
So
was going to be a dumb joke.
before we get to the English problems they have, we got to talk about two other things.
Yeah, Ukraine is still a thing. Not a lot of big movements currently going on. The Battle of Bakhmut still happening like the last time we talked. But there's actually been movement going on. Um, they've decided they're no longer going for the city. They're gonna go. They're gonna try to bypass it and surround it. Um, Here I've got a map of north of Bakhmut and south of Bakhmut on the bottom. Bakhmut's the big white blob that is in the that just so happens to be in both pictures, just different sides. And as you can see, the Russians are the red, and as you can see, they've started to move to surround. In the north, the big battle is Soledar. It has a bunch of mines. It looks like the Russians have mostly taken it over, and then the big one in the south, though not as much talking about it, probably because it's a smaller city, is Klishchivka. Uh, And funnily enough, so the Ministry of Defense and the big mercenary unit that the Russians use, Wagner, are competing for who actually took Soledar. Wagner, who's been the ones that are really who've really done most of the fighting in Bakhmut, say that they did it. But the Ministry of Defense, I think they said that the VDV took Soledar, and the VDV are Russia's best troops, the paratroopers. I do think it's weird that the minute we hear about the VDV arriving near Bakhmut, Soledar begins to fall. But yeah, they don't like each other. Wagner and the Ministry of Defense do not like each other. Another thing is just in the last couple of days, the Russians have attacked Vuhledar. The Russians are claiming massive success. The Ukrainians are saying that they've beaten them back. I've seen a bunch of videos showing a bunch of blown up Russian tanks. So I'm pretty sure they haven't done much. But in one of the more, I've had problems with this because I think it's funny, but a lot of people find it morbid that I find it funny. But then again, I've been pretty immersed in this war, so I don't know. Maybe I've just became desensitized to this. On the top right, that city, Makivka, it is in occupied territory, and there were a bunch of Russian conscripts in a school. And on New Year's Eve, they decided that they were going to shoot off weapons in celebration. Their commanding officers tried to tell them, don't do that. The Ukrainians will find our positions if you do that. And they were like, no, screw you. I want to celebrate. And then the Ukrainians hit the school, and there's competing numbers and everything. Possibly up to 600 people, I think, died in the explosion. Possibly less. They shouldn't have celebrated. Yeah, celebration during war, especially if you're firing off your guns, not a good idea. You're gonna reveal your positions.
Yeah, this ain't the World War One Christmas truce thing.
No, and that's a pretty rare thing to have happen. And then for the next conflict that I kind of wanted to talk about, mostly because I just heard about the possible high end of the numbers that come out as dead. There's been a civil war in Ethiopia since 2020, and essentially, it is extremely complicated. But the old government used to be the TPLF, the who are a Tigrayan militia, essentially. Each of these, Ethiopia is full of different ethnic groups, and they all seem to have militias. One of them is the TPLF, and that's the Tigrayan ones. Then you've got the Amharic ones as well. The Oromo also have them. It's a mess. So the TPLF lose power, but they lose power to. He's actually ethnically Oromo. I don't remember the name of the president, but when he came to power, people thought he was going to bring change. And his biggest thing was he made official peace with Eritrea to the north of Ethiopia. Eritrea used to be part of Ethiopia, but split off in the 90s, and they've had a border dispute. But some disputes with the TPLF occur. He decides to crack down on it in 2020. We've got a war going on. Initially, it looks like the TPLF is going to get defeated. Then all of a sudden, the TPLF completely reverses. And there was actually a point in which they nearly took the capital. Eritrea joined the war on the side of Ethiopia, because most of the people in Eritrea are Tigrayans. So, but they joined in. A lot. It's been blockaded, so people can't get supplies. The different militias are going around cleansing villages. It's really bad.
Yes, village cleansing usually is bad.
Yes, it's been described as a genocide, and a lot of this hasn't been helped by social media. People have used social media to ramp up anti the ethnicity they don't like rhetoric, and it's just led to a clusterfuck. The numbers, the high end of the numbers is 600,000 dead. The low end is 385,000. So a lot of people have died. This is actually so far deadlier than Ukraine. I doubt. I still think Ukraine might get deadlier,
But there's more
uh,
attention. But this one has less attention to it. I'm guessing.
yes, this one has a lot less attention to it. Recently, problems between the central government and the Oromo have started up again. The Oromo actually sided with the Tigrayans during the war for a little bit in 2021 and 2022. So, there's currently a ceasefire that started in November. We'll see if that sticks. I hope people don't stop killing each other here, but I don't know. We just gotta hope.
But speaking of problems in a little tiny area of land, smaller than this and smaller than smaller than here and smaller than Ukraine.
So we're gonna be talking about the 10th century before Ethelred the Unready. So up until the 980s, 990s, but starting in 899.
Before yeah, from Alfred the Great's death to about before all the invasion, before people started like going, let's invade England
again. So our goals today will be to talk about how did Alfred's heirs conquer England, and how did these kings set up administrations for their new kingdoms. Now, I do want to
So
make.
I'm gonna say when we last left off, Alfred was a little Wessex, and the Danes had the east coast of England all to themselves.
Yeah, well, it was actually called Greater Wessex because he essentially controlled everything south of the Thames, but and he essentially controlled Mercia as well. But yes, the Danes controlled a lot, but yeah, I do want to make sure that we know these kings were not going out to set up a kingdom of England. They were essentially just trying to expand their power. There was no idea of a kingdom of England at this time, at this 899 stage.
So they were just Wessicans.
Yeah, West Saxons and Mercians, stuff like that. And we'll actually see that local loyalties cause some issues when they try to conquer those areas. But
feudalism versus head again.
Not feudalism, just these places had been their own separate kingdoms for so long that they just kept a strong independent streak, and it took a lot of social engineering from the kings to ensure that they didn't break away, and it didn't always work either. But as we'll see later on in other presentations. But yeah. But yeah,
Awesome.
that's something I didn't like from what was it? With Utrecht Babenboer. They made it out like they wanted to create England. No, they just wanted that. There was Alfred started this idea of an England, but
Took a while.
huh?
It took a while to get everyone on board.
Yeah, it took a while, and I don't even think that the king they had doing it was Edward the Elder, and I don't even think Edward the Elder cared about making a kingdom of England. But yeah. All right, so how did the Avian settlement happen? We don't know. End of story. No, I'm kidding. There's no real written sources. It's clear though that because there's very little material changes that happened, that the ethnic makeups were fluid and pragmatic, and the Danes mostly took a lot from the Anglo-Saxons. There's a little bit of seeming inspiration from Scandinavia, but we're not sure if that's because it's an active we're trying to be like Scandinavia, or if it's like a convergence thing. But they've done genetic studies on this area, and it's clearly more related to Norway, Denmark than it is to the rest of England. So clearly something happened. We just don't know what. Just like with the Anglo-Saxons, but this is a much shorter period, and it's dominated more by, hey, look, our written sources are most definitely more dominated by, hey, this is what the Kingdom of Wessex is doing, because that's where all our sources come from. So they don't really care about the Danelaw.
So no Dane writings, no Five Bureaus writing, no Mercia writings, no York writings.
There is one little thing from Mercia, but it's it mostly just corroborates what's going on in the there's like a different version of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, but it's not that extensive because Mercia doesn't survive very long. But yeah, no, I do want to point out the 5 boroughs up here, because this will become an area of pretty big like fighting, because these are during this time, these are like the big trading settlements of the area. It's Nottingham, Derby, Leicester, Stanford, and Lincoln, known as the 5 boroughs. And these they're going to be fought over for a little while.
The bottom of the map looks like what will be London is on the corner of 3 kingdoms.
Yes, because that's also a rich settlement, but it was controlled by Mercia, because Alfred the Great gave it to Mercia.
For now.
For now, yeah. So in 899, if we go to the next slide, in 899, Alfred the Great dies, and his son Edward the Elder takes the throne. Now, Alfred the Great had a nephew who was still alive, Athelwold. Athelwold decides that he is going to initiate a civil war.
England and their civil wars with the kingdoms.
Yeah. It's clear that at the beginning of this, both sides had equal legitimacy, and neither side really had a disadvantage. But eventually, Edward takes the initiative. He invades. Ethelwold goes to East Anglia. Somehow Edward's forces are there. The Danes with Athelwold the Danes with Athelwold attack the army that was left in East Anglia. They beat it, but they lose a bunch of men and rip. Done. Goodbye.
And then from there on, most, if not all, of the kings come from Alfred's line. Hello?
Yeah.
So I hear.
They come from Alfred's line. Mercia wasn't under the control of Wessex though. It was under the control of they call him an ealdorman, so he was clearly subordinate to Wessex, but it was Alfred's son-in-law, Athelred, who was married to Alfred's eldest daughter, Athelflaed.
Okay.
And they actually do their conquests separately, but they essentially work together.
So instead of conquering it per se, they married into it, into owning it.
Yeah, they're into Mercia instead of militarily.
Like
but
why conquer
that
with
will
bullets?
change soon.
Well, not bullets. But
initially, Edward takes a more defensive stance.
Okay. That's like a joke. Why conquer with not bullets, because the bullets haven't been here yet. With swords, when you can and swords and arrows, when you can conquer with your sperm.
Yeah. But Edward initially takes a defensive approach, but that will change actually with the death of Athelred in 911 CE. Not. Oh God! I just realized. Oh no.
Not BCE.
So, is everything?
You still there?
Is the connection okay?
Yeah, you're slow. It's just like, like you come quiet every so often.
Is the connection okay?
Yeah, I can. It's him. I probably think, but you stopped talking for periods of time.
You didn't hear me talking about 9/11
Yeah, you made the joke
CE.
about.
Not
Yeah, I
the
heard that joke, and then you stopped talking.
Okay. Okay. All right. Next slide.
I am on next slide already.
Yeah. Next slide.
I did. I was here.
Oh, I can't see it. That's weird.
And I'm here.
Something's going on. Yeah. You're all laggy for me for some reason.
That's not good. That's not good at all. My slide says expansion of Edward the Elder.
Yeah, you keep breaking up. Should I leave and rejoin?
Maybe.
All right. I'll be right.
We'll be back after these messages. Any commercial for places times like this. Okay. Can you hear me better now?
I have
Can you hear?
returned.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool.
Nah, you are still. Wow.
Wow. Well, I guess it'll
One of
let you
your
talk.
streams is having connection issues.
I need a new computer.
That's not good.
We'll let you talk, and hopefully people hear you. I'll be quiet for a while.
Okay. All right. So, in 911 CE, Athelred dies, and Mercia comes under the control of Athelflaed. Both of their they go more on to the aggressive stage of conquest. Both of their strategies were to take chunks of territory, build bourse, and then hold that for a little bit, and then go again. So it's this real piecemeal consolidation. But they eventually control all the territory south of the Humber, so everything except for Northumbria. And they actually let many of the Danish leaders keep their autonomy at during this initial stage, because it's a lot more rule over like vassals than it is to integrate the territory and then have to deal with all that. In 918, Athelflaed dies, and Edward the Elder integrates Mercia into Wessex for a little bit.
So for now, they are the same
So
kingdom.
in the next slide, yes. So Edward dies in June of 924, and he initially divides his kingdom between Alfweard and Athelstan. Athelstan controls Wessex, while Alfweard controls Mercia. Alfweard dies soon after coming to the throne. But this initial idea that not everything is seen as the same kingdom yet. They'll do this dividing the kingdom upon death and then integration.
Yeah.
Times.
So this is around the time of, instead of leaving everything to the eldest son, you give your kingdom to all your kids. Everyone has a piece of it.
Not necessarily all of your kids, but I just don't think they really thought of these two kingdoms as the same thing. So
Okay.
he decided to divide the kingdom. It also seemed as if Alfweard was really popular in Mercia because he had campaigned there with his aunt.
Okay. I was wondering if it was.
So he just seemed to be more popular there. Might
I
as
was
well
wondering if
divide the kingdom. They just don't see them as the same.
Okay. I was wondering if it was like Charlemagne when his kingdom was divided among his three grandkids over in France and Germany, and it was like, you get France, you get Germany, and then have fun of it instead of having the whole kingdom.
Athelstan. Yeah, and then Athelstan takes over. And Athelstan will do the initial conquest of Northumbria.
Okay.
If you go to the next slide.
Yes, master.
So it seems the initial conquest was surprisingly peaceful in 927. And he brings together all all of the different kings and princes and everything with interests in the area to a place called Eamont. It's not important that it's there, but yeah. So Eamont, at Eamont, they all decide we're going to be peaceful. We're not going to do anything, okay? We're not going to fight each other. And this lasts for a while. And then we don't really know what happens for some reason. And Athelstan is invading Scotland in 934. Who knows why?
Because I know why. Because England likes to invade Scotland. It's their thing.
That is true. That is true. They do like invading Scotland. It could have been that Scotland had decided to support maybe somebody who had interest in taking Northumbria. Just we don't know why, but this happens. And interestingly enough, it does look as though Scotland and a bunch of different Viking forces, including the King of Dublin, who will become important later, come together and fight as a force, but are defeated in 937 at Brunanburh. This is a battle that they made poems about because it was such a great. I love this battle. They're like, oh yeah,
Who loves it? The Scottish.
This is our the English one. The English one. And essentially for the rest of Athelstan's reign, secured Northumbria. This was their Battle of Alesia. This was their Battle of Pharsalus. Just something that they, talked about in poems and everything. But yeah, you've defeated all of your rivals now. But what happens when you die? Which,
well, hopefully you have a secure succession line waiting for you. But I guess
yeah,
he didn't.
He did, but sadly wasn't able to control Northumbria. He dies in 939 and is succeeded by Edmund. Yes, all of these kings' names are going to get confusing. I don't expect you to remember them. It's just important to know. Yeah.
Unless
the succession.
Unless you're like a England history freak, I guess.
Yeah. It's just important to know a succession occurs. A little bit of that royal authority is lost, and in the process, Northumbria is gone. And it actually seems that this is our first cropping up of local allegiance. Well, not our first, because technically it does seem as if the Mercians were wanting the division of the kingdom earlier. But this is, I guess, the second time. The Archbishop of York and many of the local elites in Northumbria didn't want Edmund as their king. So they invite the King of Dublin, who had fought at Brunanburh and was one of the losers. He invades in 940. His name is Olaf Guthfridsson. I hope I pronounced it somewhat correctly.
Well,
he's able to take.
I guess for once, Ireland took over, was invading England the other way around.
Yeah. Dublin was actually a pretty prosperous kingdom at the time. It's probably why Dublin eventually becomes the capital, but lots of slavery happened there, but also a lot of commerce, so it became really rich and had pretty good ties with Northumbria, which is why Olaf probably was able to invade so easily. He also takes control of the 5 boroughs, so this event was enough to push England all the way back, not only out of Northumbria, but also losing some of its conquered territory in the Danelaw. And this isn't the first time they actually lose both Northumbria and the 5 boroughs. But in 941, Olaf dies. Nice. Thank God. Next slide.
Yes.
And the Edmund is able to reestablish his authority over the 5 boroughs in 942. And this is also the people at the time saw this with the as an achievement that rivaled Brunenburg. I don't really think it does. I don't know. Well, you know. And then in 944 he reinvades Northumbria. But then comes more Vikings. No. But this is under Edmund's success. Edmund was his name, right? Yeah. Edmund's successor, Eadred. And it's another Olaf Sihtricsson, and Eric Bloodaxe. And they're able to control the 5 boroughs as well. But this will be the last time Northumbria asserts its independence in the creation phase. I'm trying to remember if they assert it later. Not really. They don't really do that. But by 954, Northumbria is fully under the control of England, and Eadred and his successors are able to now begin the process of creating a common identity.
Something to unite them.
So in 955, Eadred dies.
So is this when they become what you call a state or a nation yet? Or did they what?
I didn't quite hear you because
Is this when they become what you either a nation or a state, like your thing from a few months ago? A common people yet or not?
Yeah. Yeah, it does kind of come into that. I did see a claim that no, it's neither at this point. It's gonna be a while before we get any sort of nation out of this. Though I have seen some historians claim that England under Edgar is a nation state. I think they're stupid. I think calling England in the 10th century a nation state is just dumb. So next slide. So we have another division of the kingdom after Eadred dies, between Edgar and Eadwy. That says Eadwy, not Eadwig. Don't say Eadwig, it's Eadwy.
Not earwig.
Old English, yeah, Old English is stupid. In 955, I'm pretty sure it's divided. I can't remember. Edgar might have controlled Northumbria and Eadwy controlled the south, and then Eadwy dies and Edgar reunifies the kingdom in 959. Edgar will be if Alfred the Great is seen as the beginner of this resurgence in Anglo-Saxon culture, Edgar is the golden age. And he's probably the most powerful Anglo-Saxon monarch that doesn't fuck up his entire reign. Sorry, that is a bad word. I'm sorry. Because I'm talking about Athelred the Unready, who's next time. His name is the Unready for a reason. And it's not for the reason why you might think. But yeah. For some reason, he waits until 973 to be coronated, and he's coronated in Bath, and he brings all of the other kings of Britain to Bath. This image right here of him in the boat, all those oarsmen are the kings in Britain.
Now, question.
So he goes out.
Was Bath an old Roman settlement where the plumbing was?
Yeah, it was AngloSaxon, and that's, I think, the baths of Caracalla were there. There was a big bath complex there of baths. And it's probably because of its prestige that he chose Bath to be coronated. And he's coronated as above all the kings of Britain. And he came out on the water in this boat, and he's the one in the front, and they're all the oarsmen. If that doesn't tell you how much power Edgar had, I don't know what does. Because, yeah.
Like, I'm your supreme king now.
His time as king
bow to me.
Yeah. Yeah. His time as king would be, he would essentially set up all of the structures that will eventually be used by future rulers. He's the one who sets up he's the one that finalizes many of the laws that govern the different administrations, laws that govern the church. And we'll see that in the next slide. This isn't just, by the way, when I'm talking about administering the kingdom. This was a gradual process. He just has the most out of all of them, and uses it especially for church reforms. So we have an immense expansion of legal activity during this time. Be issued constantly, to the point that they're named after the king, and then they have a Roman numeral right after them to say which law code it was. So, for example, Athelstan 1, Athelstan 2, Athelstan 3, Athelstan 4, that kind of thing. Seems more that these law codes were kind of like negotiation tools. All the nobles would come together, they'd make a law code, they'd see if it works, then they'd come back together again and reassess and issue another law code. So that's why there's a bunch of law codes.
So is that kind of like the Pirates of the Caribbean? Like, they're not rules, more like guidelines. Check from that movie. I forget how it went.
Yeah, they're more like guidelines that we're constantly changing to ensure that the running of the kingdom is smooth, and also to keep up the idea that Edgar or any of these kings of England are the superior to everybody else. And we're gonna see a lot of activity through these administrative divisions, the shires and the hundreds. These will be controlled by local nobility, and they're the ones that have to administer the laws in the area, as well as many of the freemen in the area. So clearly, there has to be cooperation between the king and the local nobility for any of this to work.
So this is more like feudalism then.
Proto-feudalism.
Okay.
Feudalism is a really weird term. I could get in a whole rant about the term feudalism and why it's not really a good term and doesn't really describe really any government ever. But I don't want to, so I have to.
We'll save that. We'll save that for our $50 Patreons. Just kidding. I don't have any of those.
We'll say that for a different time. So the lowest. So go to the next slide. The lowest of these administrative divisions was the 100. In the more northern areas, there's a lot less hundreds, and they control more territory. In the south, there's a bunch of these things, and and sometimes it's only like 2 cities. So that they'd hold 100 court every month where everybody comes to one meeting place. Usually prominent landscape features or like ancient ruins. Stonehenge, I think, was one of these distinctive features that they would go to. And this was all about administering justice. They'd witness the transactions that would happen that month, and they'd decide there's a criminal and we have to pursue him together. There might be more like rich people that are. Wait, yeah, there is a reeve. There, yeah, they do have a head, and the head is supposed to administer all of this. But it's all about administering justice. They meet a lot more than the Shire court does. And in the Danish areas, it's not called 100, it's called a wapentake. So a little bit of some of the cultural influence of the Danes, because it's not called the 100 there, it's called the wapentake. And now we're going to talk about the cool ones that bring us the sheriff.
Hence the term Shire.
Yes, the Shire. These are the historical counties of England, and they run along the lines of historical shires. It does seem that Wessex had these. It does seem that Wessex had these under the reign of King Ina, and it looks with the changing needs of the state, the shires also changed. At first, it's just an administrative thing. During the Conquest, it becomes more of a military structure. But eventually, under Edgar and his successors, we start seeing the more medieval idea of the Shire, where the Shire court meets twice a year. It would be held by the secular leader of the Shire, the Ealdorman, and the religious leader of the Shire, the bishop of the area. And they would present all of the laws. Because the laws are constantly changing, they have to ensure that all of these new laws are transmitted to the populace so that they know what they're doing. Eventually, you'd get more power being wrested away from the Ealdorman and being held by the Shire, which is the origin of our term sheriff. It's also unknown when Mercia was divided into shires. However, the theory that the book I'm reading mostly goes down with is that it was divided under Edward the Elder, because it seems as if local powerful communities get divided in weird ways to ensure that their powers are lessened.
Now, I guess even the sheriffs back then had more power than the sheriffs do it in America
And
nowadays.
the closest to the king is the royal court. Oh. I mean, I guess the power of the sheriff was more just you're appointed by the king, and your power is essentially like you're gonna administer the law in the area. So yeah, it'd be more like the power of a governor than it would be our current sheriffs.
Okay.
Clyde. This was really where the kings of England would get their the loyalty of their subjects, mostly the nobility. It doesn't matter. They don't care what the peasants think. They care what the nobles think. The royal court, which was always centered within Wessex and later in London, so one central location. Essentially, all the nobles throughout the kingdom would have to travel to the capital where the royal court was in order to see the king. It's a way of getting them away from their power bases so that they can't challenge your rule or they can't build up local loyalties. They would frequently hold feasts and celebrations to encourage shared identity amongst the various nobles in a way that like build friendships, build a sense of community to ensure that they don't want to rebel and fight each other.
We're all friends
Another
here.
way to control. Yeah.
Was one of the things they did by saying
One of the ways in which he was able to not only
I was going to ask it's one of the ways like they do even nowadays is, hey, instead of fighting each other, let's fight a common enemy. Let's all team up against that guy over there. He's not us. Or they're not us.
Yeah, they definitely had that when they were trying to conquer the Danelaw and when they were trying to conquer Northumbria. Yeah, they definitely used an outside enemy more during that time. But this was a time of peace, so they didn't really have that.
Damn peace.
It was a time where they had to build this up through things like feasts. Another way to more pit nobles against each other instead of against the king, and also to
Also, the what?
Humans are very weird. You know,
Yeah.
they like prestige for some reason. And, like, prestige can sometimes be more important than wealth, and that's probably because a wealth accumulation is easier when you have higher prestige. So definitely the king would use his ability to grant titles and things to and grant titles and lands in order to keep the more powerful people on his side, so that they don't want to rebel. And if somebody does rebel, he's got very powerful armies on his side, while the person who does rebel doesn't. And we actually do see a lot of powerful families rise during this time. And it's actually quite interesting. It seems like there was a deliberate policy to give nobles lands in random areas throughout the kingdom. So, not keep them all together. Make sure that if another reason for this is if they want to rebel, their lands are not centrally located, so you can't have this central area to bring all your forces to. Your forces are scattered if you try to rebel. This is another way of trying to essentially control your subjects that have to fight you, so that they don't fight you. And if they do fight you, they lose.
Know your winning side.
Yeah. And the final way that Edgar, especially, because this mostly happens under Edgar, tries to control his kingdom is through religion. So the next.
What you mean? People control the religion? They control the people? Wow, that would never happen nowadays.
It's more he encouraged certain movements within the kingdom that reduced the power of people that had throughout history used patronages of church property to gain power and wealth. He encouraged reforms that ended that power and more made it so that instead of gaining wealth from these churches, you were sapping wealth by giving money to these churches instead, and not gaining wealth, but you were gaining prestige instead. So yeah, kind of using the the religion to control people. So the Benedictine reforms were all about how is the church going to be run. They saw the time of Bede and the monasteries where monks were powerful and seen as moral upstanding monks that didn't, you know, do bad things that they weren't supposed to do. They saw this as this golden age that they wanted to go back to. They wanted these monasteries to no longer be held by secular secular powers that were using them for wealth instead and didn't encourage knowledge. So this was
So
essentially started what yeah.
I can make a joke. So was this the "Make England Great Again" time of like "Make England Great
Yes.
Again"?
Make the English church great again. And there are three big reformers. Two of them went to the continent to went to the continent to study and gain ideas. The other sent someone to the continent instead of going himself. Funnily enough, the one that did not go to the continent was the most vigorous of the three reformers. So the three reformers are Dunstan, who becomes the Archbishop of Canterbury, Athelwold, who was Bishop of Winchester, which is the traditional capital of Wessex, and Oswald, who was Bishop of Worcester. Worcester. Yes, I know that doesn't look like it's pronounced Worcester. Don't fight me, fight the British on this one. This isn't my fault. And he was also Archbishop of York. Athelwold was Dunstan and Oswald wanted a more gradual reformation where they gradually brought in new monks and let the old church people leave. Athelwold wasn't having it. He said, "Get the fuck out right now. You're gone." And brought in the new guys. And he seems to actually have gotten the consent of Edgar to do this. So clearly Edgar, he was either a true believer or he knew the power of what the power of these reforms would do, or he could have been both. I always say both. They saw a change to urban centers, especially in Winchester, because they had to build walls to block off the what's called the New Minster in Winchester from the public, because it's kind of this retreating of the monks. Before they were all worldly and trading and everything. Now they're going to be going back into the monasteries and reading all the time and not going to be interacting with the rest of the world as much anymore. And instead of allowing nobles to profit off of church land, instead they had to build churches on land and they had to pay for it. And all they got out of it was prestige.
Good old prestige.
Yeah, humans are weird. I don't get it, but it's a good way of manipulating people to ensure that they listen to you.
It's a good thing that it doesn't happen nowadays in today's society at all.
What? No. What? Yeah, these three figures were pretty powerful. Some of them actually wrote law codes about how monks were supposed to act. I think that was Athelwold. Athelwold was the most liked out of them, even though he was never Archbishop of Canterbury, which was the big boy in the English church. He was only the Bishop of Winchester. But that might have been because the capital was still in Winchester, so he's next to the king and everything. I don't really remember when they actually changed the capital to London, but yeah, there you go.
And that's it for this part of history.
Now, it's very important to note that there's a successor. I think it's his successor. One of the kings after him decides to screw it all up. And, his name's Athelred the Unready.
But that's a story for another time.
Yeah. Oh, my God. He screws it all up. Oh, more for his family than for the Kingdom of England.
Yeah, England survives, and technically his family survives.
Yeah.
Wait,
I'm pretty
marriage.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, his great granddaughter marries Henry the First of England. Or
yeah,
great granddaughter.
Yeah, they fled to Hungary after this mad lad named Kenneth conquers, they flee to Hungary. They live there for a little bit.
and then later on
It's interesting.
Scotland.
Yeah,
But like
but yeah,
again, that's a story for next time.
yeah. Are there any questions?
I don't think I have any, and I don't think my chat person is have anything. But I do have one question. Well, not about this, but so what do you think of at the end of if you do it once a month, you keep it up at the end of at the last Saturday of each month? We do this. The England Day.
Sure, sure. England Day.
The England Day. Last. Okay, people, you want to hear about England? Come to last Saturday of each month. You hear it live, and bring your questions.
Yeah. Damn.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I said so. So overall, what is your opinion of this time in England history? English history.
My opinion. I think this is the most
Yeah.
powerful the House of Wessex ever was. Yeah, Edward the Confessor had a lot of power, but he was also a really weak king. Athelred the Unready just screws it all up for the House of Wessex.
That'd be Edward's daddy, I think, right?
Yeah, Edward the Confessor's father. Yeah. And if anything, um, Athelred the Unready actually does screw it up for England if you don't like the Normans. Stupid Normans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since he married someone a little lady called Emma, got that blood in the mixture there.
Yeah. Also, this is the most powerful. This is one of the most powerful the kings were. More and more these local families, even though their land holdings are more spread out, um, it eventually gets to the point that sometimes these noble families are more powerful than the king, and while they're not going to rebel against the king, uh, they're willing to use the king more as a puppet, like how the Godwinsons used Edward the Confessor, kind of thing. Canute, of course, controls more power, but he's also controlling like 3 different kingdoms, so it doesn't really count. he doesn't really count.
Yeah.
But yeah, whoever said that, like, I don't get it. He said that this period of England was a nation state, so essentially a state comprised mostly like the nation state is a incredibly modern term, and I don't know why he decided to use it on the Kingdom of England, especially when many of the various parts of the kingdom had different loyalties that just happened to like still send king. I
So
really don't like this.
So it wasn't a nation of people yet. It was at this point. It was still this nation of we're Wessexans, we're Northumbrians, we're Vissians,
Yeah,
Mercians.
yeah, yeah. The kings held a lot of power, but a nation state? I'm sorry, that really got me.
Yeah, so that wasn't a thing until the 1800s. Then really yet.
Yeah, nation states are definitely like a nation states are usually highly centralized. Um,
But I guess of all, like I'm guessing of all the countries of Europe, this one was probably the more nation statey of all the rest of Europe at this point. I think.
uh, yeah, I guess you could say that because this is the Carolingians are still around, and they're currently having their crises where like
Yeah,
multiple
and
different families are competing for the throne of West Francia and
and
everything.
Spain's
So,
still controlled by the Moors and barely kingdom there, and there's the Holy Roman Empire, so that's all over the place, and Italy's not a thing yet. So
um, so with the Holy Roman Empire, a lot of people like to I don't know. I think that the Holy Roman Empire's foundation is under Otto the Great. So a little bit later, some people give it to Charlemagne because his title was Emperor of the Romans. But at that time, it's just it's just a different state than the Holy Roman Empire was for me personally. But you can have there's different historians have different opinions on
Yeah.
that. So
All I'm saying is right now, England is the most put together of all the Europe. Right now, I think England's the most put together of all the rest of Europe at this point.
yeah, it quickly goes down the shitter though. So
You mean something that doesn't go well in Europe? I don't believe that at all.
what? No.
But well, thanks for being on. Next week we learn about why Alfred wasn't ready for what was coming, and we learned about the baby Warner possibly two invasions by the by the descendants of the Danish people,
Yeah.
the Scandinavians and the Normans.
Well, there was actually two invasions by Denmark. Svein Forkbeard was the first one, and then Canute the Great.
But I thought Forkbeard was Kenneth's father.
Yeah, Svein invades first, then he gets kicked for a little bit. Well, he dies, and
Mhm.
the Danes are kicked out.
And
But
then his
then
son's
Canute comes.
yeah, it's like his son's like, hey, this is my dad. This is my this was my dad's. So this is mine now.
Yeah. So 3 invasions of Scandinavia.
Well,
Though I
I
think
guess
it's just gonna.
if we get technical about it, I consider I always thought it was the since the same family
Ah,
some
yeah.
reconquering. But again, we'll learn about that next time. Any last words you want to talk about? Anything? I would say I can say anything on your channel, but you don't have the channel really.
Nothing but Slava Ukraini.
I enjoy. Everyone. If you want to learn more about this yourself, what book are you reading? They can read if they want to.
It's called The Anglo-Saxon World by Nicholas J. Higham and Martin J. Ryan. It's very technical though, so I don't know if it's for. There's some good. What History Times got some good videos about this period too, so you can go there.
All right. As for me, we'll be back here next in about a month for the thing. But also go to my community poll and vote for what trilogy you want me to talk about next. Up for vote, we have uh, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, the Christian Bale Batman trilogy, or the Iron Man trilogy for Robert Downey Jr. That's all for vote on my community tab and my Twitter page. So whichever one we talk about next month, go vote. But until then, never stop learning. Enjoy the randomness. We'll see you next time. Bye.